Who's surprising at training camp, and what does that mean for roster battles? Plus, what's going on with these running backs as Samaje Perine is still ahead of Chris Evans? Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. Together, we are the Locked On Bengals podcast, covering your Cincinnati Bengals every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. We're free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, hit the bell on YouTube. Make sure you follow on your audio platform of choice. Will be delivered to your devices as soon as we upload every day. Today, we're brought to you by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And for our listeners, you can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. James, in training camp, opportunities are ripe. Undrafted free agents have hope. Injuries open doors for others, and the roster is not set. For guys fighting for their first NFL job or to catch on to an NFL team after struggling along on the practice squad or sticking it out, persevering on the practice squad, training camp is certainly one of the biggest opportunities for them to set themselves apart. And that obviously also goes into preseason games. A couple guys we've talked about as undrafted free agents to keep an eye on are guys like Kwame Lassiter, Tyrekus Tisdale. We've talked about 7th round pick Jeff Gunter, who has been all over the place a little bit in this training camp. There have been opportunities for guys like Dax Hill, for now guys like Cam Taylor-Britt with some minor injuries around the team, for guys at right guard and right tackle. We've been monitoring those locations. You've been at all the training camp practices, James. Who has stood out to you the most in terms of guys seizing the opportunity?
Well, I could go with the skill player here, but your comment on our last show about me not focused on trench play and one-on-ones, well, damn it, maybe I'm going to turn into a trench feed where I'm just stuck to the offensive and defensive lines. Hell no, I'm not doing that, by the way. I'm too flashy and I'm way too damn loud, and I like attention too much to do that. Jake, that being said, I am going to start with the trenches, and I'm going to start with a guy who is getting second-team reps at that center spot. Ben Brown. And we'll see here, if he can push and make the team. But he was on my preseason or pre-training camp. Pre-training camp would be what it would be. Pre-training camp 53-man roster. And I think he's going to be good enough to beat out Trey Hill if it comes down to it. And so he's been impressive from what I've seen. We haven't seen as much from the trench guys just because full pads, one padded practice, they aren't hitting a ton, but you're seeing some, and you've certainly seen more recently. And I think Ben Brown has done what I expected him to do up to this point, and my expectations are pretty high considering we're talking about an undrafted center here. Wouldn't be shocked at all if he makes the roster. I thought it going into training camp, and I feel the same way today, 6 practices in.
An undrafted center who I believe had a 5th round, maybe it was a 6th round, but I thought it was a 5th round grade from Dane Brugler and the Beast over at The Athletic. Mm-hmm. We've talked to Dane quite a bit and referred to his work. It doesn't necessarily sound like good news for Lamont Gilliard more than anything else, because I think Trey Hill and Ben Brown will have a true battle, and you need that depth at center in case there are injuries, which is why Gilliard's still on the team. He can also play multiple interior line positions, as can Ben Brown and Trey Hill. That is interesting, though. We haven't really mentioned Ben Brown's name since the start of training camp after discussing him as a college free agent who could push for a roster spot in the pre-training camp episodes and the previews. And Trey Hill is a guy who certainly had ups and downs as a rookie, is still younger than Ben Brown, as I have pointed out, and has some development time left. Are they splitting second-team reps?
Yeah, from what I saw, you're still seeing some Trey Hill. It's not just straight Ben Brown, but the fact that we're seeing him, with the second. I mean, think about it. We could be 2 weeks away from him snapping to Brandon Allen now if he's with the second team, which is kind of weird to say. But Yeah, I think I've been really impressed with him. But with that said, you mentioned Kwame Lassiter. And all right, we got the trench guy out of the way. Let's talk about the real meat and potatoes. And it's number 18, Kwame Lassiter. I know I think, get it? I flipped it on you.
You're getting your analogies mixed up, James.
No, receivers eat big meals too, damn it. No, Kwame Lassiter. Look, a lot of people love him in OTAs. I like him. I think he's done enough so far from a punt return perspective, which really what's going to come down to in the preseason. Will he flash at that spot? That's his path to making the roster. But I do think he brings something at receiver. I think he's a good route runner. He's not a burner, but we've seen him make some catches in team drills and stand out there. Let me give you one more receiver because he's a guy that really goes under the radar. And it's kind of funny because the guy that used to wear number 19 got a lot of love from this time of year from Bengals fans during training camp. And I'm talking about Auden Tate, of course. Kendrick Pryor making some plays. And I don't know if it's realistic to expect him to push for a roster spot, but I think he's going to make some plays in the preseason. And if he does, he certainly has a realistic shot to go from undrafted to at least practice squad. So another guy that I've seen make some plays through the first 6 practices.
It's just such an uphill battle for all of these guys to find a roster spot at wide receiver. The first 5 spots are essentially set in stone. The big 3, the starters, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, obviously aren't going anywhere. Stanley Morgan, Mike Thomas, not going anywhere. And then is it Trent Taylor and Kwame Lassiter for 1 spot? Or is it those guys plus another guy for 2 spots? Mm-hmm. Because Darren Simmons has said, Kwame, the only way you're making the team is if you're returning punts. He has been the second punt returner to Trent Taylor. And so that is just such a challenge for all these guys, for Puka Williams, for Trenton Irwin, for Javon Hiley, who we haven't talked about after there was some hype after he signed as a college free agent, and Jack Sorensen. These guys all just have their work cut out for them. And I would say the same is even true for a lot of the guys on the defensive side of the ball that we haven't talked about as much, but there is more opportunity there as well with Khalid Kareem, for example, still on the PUP list. He's not practicing, with some guys not necessarily that were eased in, I guess. So some opportunities there as well, but there are some crowded spots on the depth chart. And for me, this is around the point in preseason where I like to start focusing on who are some of the guys that are pushing for roster spots, pushing their way up the depth chart. And one that's quite interesting, James, that I want to get into is a running back conversation, because Samaje Perine, I know he got had maybe a minor injury of some sort in a punt return drill on Tuesday, but Zach Taylor's comments indicating that Chris Evans and Travion Williams are battling for running back 3. Travion Williams is a guy who, great attitude, has done all the right things for a long time, but a little bit surprising. Let's talk running backs coming up next.
But first, a word from the number 1 protein bar on the planet. Not number 2, not number 7, not number 8. Number 1, Built Bar is the best protein bar I've ever had. I have one, at least one, every single day. Brought 2 to training camp on Tuesday and held them both. One of them was, a Built Bar Puff. The cookie dough chunk puffs are amazing. Look, you like cookie dough. Well, imagine that with chocolate, with a bunch of protein, 15 grams of protein to be exact, and just 160 calories. Makes a ton of sense to eat, right? Yeah, I think so too. So don't delay. Be like me and go to built.com. Use promo code LOCK15 and you're going to get 15% off. Oh, yeah, that's right. I do. I use that promo code LOCK15. I like saving money too. So go there now, built.com, and use promo code LOCK15.
James, we've talked about Joe Mixon getting more involved in the passing game, especially after back together Saturday when he had a big day receiving passes. We've talked about his need to perform better and earn the trust of coaches year after year in pass protection, which the coaches seem to prefer Samaje Perine for. They have comfort that Samaje Perine is a real meat and potatoes guy. A guy that will do his job, do the basics, and execute his responsibility on the field. That's what I think of when I think of meat and potatoes guys.
I'm hungry.
The guys you need.
I need to go get a Built Bar. I'll be right back.
Chris Evans is a guy that is like that cookie dough Built Bar, James, who you're hoping can provide a little bit of sizzle, who can provide a little bit of a home run threat, who can be the guy that we saw have an opportunity in the Super Bowl for a big play early in that game that was clearly scripted to get him on a linebacker when he's lined up out wide and to take advantage of that mismatch. But what we're hearing is a couple things. One, the coaching staff is saying, hey, Chris Evans, Hive, calm down. We are not where you are, or we're trying to motivate Chris Evans by talking about him this way, because according to Zach Taylor, Samaje Perine is ahead for running back 2, and Chris Evans and Travion Williams are battling it out for running back 3. And I get it. Travion Williams has been good in preseason opportunities when he's gotten on the field and does have some athleticism to his game and has stuck around as, like Chris Evans, a 6th-round pick for the duration of his rookie deal. But that's surprising to me, with Chris Evans' role growing as the year went on last year, with him having an opportunity in the Super Bowl that I just talked about. Is this a motivational attempt from tactic from Zach Taylor, or is this actually a competition?
No, it's a lie. Zach Taylor's gotten better at doing the coaches speak part of it, right? So now we're not so focused. He probably could feel the focus of calling for Chris Evans over Samaje Perine, and he obviously knows Joe Mixon's comments last week and the 4th and 1 in the Super Bowl and the 3rd and 1 in the Super Bowl, all that stuff where, well, Perine gets fairly blamed or unfairly blamed or whatever you want to talk about. And I think it's more Zach Taylor than anything, but Zach's aware of that. And so instead of making it about Perine and Evans, I think he's kind of deflecting it some. Travion Williams isn't ahead of Chris Evans. I would be shocked, right, if that's the case, if that ends up that way. So, no, I'm not truly calling Zach a liar, but I do think he's gotten better during his 4 years of being a head coach of talking through things and not necessarily just being completely 100% upfront or honest or anything like that. And so now, is there a true competition for RB3? Hell no. I think Chris Evans is bigger. I think he's stronger. I think he's faster. If you're talking about a guy that's going to give you, the special teams help, all of those things, I think he's ahead of Travion Williams. Now, the Bengals, and this is where Zach was telling the truth, the Bengals do have Samaje Perine ahead of Chris Evans. And part of it is because he does all of the boring, dull crap that no one really likes to pay attention to or sees, and they trust him to pass block. And he doesn't have the mental errors that Joe Mixon has doing that. I think Chris Evans has had some good pass blocking moments. Can he get all the way there? That's his path. And so that's probably, if there's a motivational tactic, and I don't really think Zach does this through the media anyway, he probably would say, Chris, this is what we want from you. But he needs to get better in pass protection, because if he does, he's more talented than Samaje Perine. He's not as thick, but he's just better out of the backfield. He's more dynamic. He runs routes like a receiver. Like, he's just unique. He's different. And that's why I've been really bullish on him. But you have to do the other stuff too, because you're still the backup. You're still not going to be Joe Mixon. And I don't think he is Joe Mixon, for what it's worth. Joe Mixon, those guys don't grow on trees. Hell, he's as big as a tree. So I think that Chris Evans could still get that second running back spot. It is an uphill climb, but I would be shocked if he ever dropped back to RB4. Travion Williams would have to play really out of his mind, I think, in the preseason, or Evans would just have to really screw up for those guys to switch roles.
I feel like it would have to be that or just something mental. But the way the season went last year and the opportunities that Chris Evans got all of last year ahead of Travion Williams, I don't see it either. The way that Evans tested, the way that coaches talked about Chris Evans last year when we talked to them after the draft, when we talked to them last offseason, talking about just how excited they were for the way that he moves on the football field, for the dynamism he brings at that position, the versatility that we've talked about a bunch in the receiving game, and just, young, inexperienced running back things probably is the hesitancy there. We've seen time and time again, regimes around the NFL take time to trust their young running backs to do what they need to do in pass protection. And, similar to the whole holding with punters, right? Punting is the part of the job that everyone sees and pays attention to. But Darren Simmons has talked about how holding is so important for these guys. And that being the case for punters, I think also applies maybe to a larger degree and a less quiet degree for running backs, where that pass protection job and knowing your responsibility on different plays, not just running the football, not just catching the football, is so very important to coaches.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of things like that, right? That go under the radar to even us for most
Run
of the
blocking
time,
for wide
but
receivers.
right? And
Run fits for
guess who's
defensive
really
linemen.
good? Guess who's really good at blocking? The Bengals wide receivers. They're not going to lead Sports Center with that if Jamar, unless because it's going to be Jamar Chase had 3 touchdowns, or Tyler Boyd had this, or T. Higgins had that. But they're good at that stuff. And so guess what? They can be on the field and not leave the field because you don't need to put in a special blocker, right? And so that's the Joe Mixon and Chris Evans theory. And here's the thing. Perine's proven. He's got 1 more year on his deal. Joe Mixon, obviously, starting out that, year 2 of that $12 million per year, 4-year, $48 million contract. And Chris Evans is only in year 2. So it's not a bad thing here. Maybe it takes another year. Evans can still be used in the passing game. You can still get a lot of that flash and bottle that up and use that when you need to give this offense a boost, and also have 34 Samaje Perine out there to pass block. And guess what? Keep the franchise upright. So it's not the worst thing in the world. I'm not going to, lose sleep over, the RB2 battle, so to speak, especially because Perine is proven and he certainly has the trust of this coaching staff.
That's right. We've got some stadium upgrade news, James. We're going to dive into some concept photos that have come out by way of the county and Gensler. We're going to get into some stadium upgrades that could be coming up next. But today's episode brought to you by BetterHelp, which making therapy more accessible is a true passion that I feel strongly about, which is why you're hearing about this from me on the Locked On Bengals podcast. BetterHelp is an online therapy service that will assess your needs. You'll go through and fill out a questionnaire saying what you're looking for, what your goals are, what your preferences are in a therapist, and they'll match you with that professional therapist in less than 48 hours. Like I said at the top of the show, it is not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It is access to professional therapy that is more affordable than traditional offline therapy with financial aid available. It's a fantastic way to invest in yourself, to conquer whatever it is that is holding you back, to find tangible ways to work on whatever it is your personal goals are, or whatever it is you need to work through. They've got video and phone sessions available in case you want to be on camera or you don't. And we have a special offer for you right now. You can get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. Again, that's 10% off your first month of therapy at BetterHelp. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon.
Let's keep things rolling, Jake, with, something that I think a lot of people have been thinking about in the back of their minds, and the stadium lease coming up in 2026 potentially. And I remember like 2016, 2017, I was like, this again. The good news is Joe Burrow's in town, so I think this could go maybe a little smoother than it did the last time. But it's not going to be a rebuilt stadium. It's not going to be a brand new stadium, but it is going to be updates. And anyone that's been to Paul Brown Stadium, I think it's fair to say, yeah, updates would make a lot of sense. And we saw some different renderings of things that the county in the Bengals are already discussing, which makes sense since it's, 4 years away, and they're probably going to need to get things moving.
Yeah, and this, I think, as we've discussed, James, will go hand in hand with potential sponsorship opportunities as well. One thing included in this plan is the changed naming rights for the stadium. This is maybe where that report initially came, I guess not exactly, but it is part of the plans. One of the pieces of this plan is selling naming rights as an opportunity. We could see this for gates around the stadium. We could see this for certain sections of the stadium. There's some pretty cool ideas in here. Some of them are very traditional, like improving suites, adding diversity of different seat types, where right now their mix of seats is heavily just general admission and club seats, and they're talking about adding standing room areas, premium suites, differentiating the suites, different boxes, field suites, that sort of thing. So a wider array of service levels that they're talking about putting in. So some of the stuff, like very typical, you think back to Madden 2006 or whatever, when franchise mode came out, you can make stadium upgrades, and it was like, upgrade your suites, upgrade your video screen, but also some pretty cool stuff like incorporating different cultural aspects of Cincinnati into different sections around the stadium. So having a Findlay Market section of the stadium, for example, where they take cultural staples of Cincinnati that are thematic and have different thematic zones around the park, redoing some of the entryways to the football stadium so that there's less congestion, so that it's maybe safer for pedestrians, so that it's got better throughput. And my favorite is the nightclub idea that's in there. They're talking about putting in a nightclub. So go clubbing down at Paul Brown Stadium.
Is that your favorite? I don't feel like you're pretty,
I think it's pretty hilarious.
Here's what I can't wait for. I can't wait for, well, these current receivers wouldn't do that. But if there was a club at Paul Brown Stadium when Chad Johnson was there, that dude would have sprinted up the steps to the club and did his touchdown celebration in the club. Look, it needs to happen, right? It doesn't take, like I said, it's one of those things where you have a professional football team. Now, how do the negotiations happen? All that. Well, we'll dive into that minutia probably at some point. That day isn't today, but obviously the stadium needs to be upgraded. There are certain things that need to happen. I've been in that stadium regularly outside of my Cleveland time from about 2015 on. And obviously before that, I had been there here and there. It just wasn't on a regular basis. And it's not like anything's changed much, right? I remember going there when it was 2000, Corey Dillon broke the rushing record, right? I remember going there, their first preseason game, I believe, was against the Bears of Paul Brown Stadium. So they have a lot of space. There's opportunity to revamp this and modernize the stadium. It's, I think, a good size. It doesn't need to get bigger. You don't need to do anything. But if you expand certain areas and take advantage of the space that's kind of unused right now, I think it'll be fine. So need some sprucing up a bit. What doesn't? That's, building doesn't. That's 20 plus years old. And honestly is home to a $1 billion plus franchise. Of course it does. So hopefully they're able to work things out and get the upgrades necessary to continue to make the fan experience great, which the Bengals have obviously made that a really a priority the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, and they're borrowing inspiration from other nice features in baseball stadiums and football stadiums around the United States. A Camden Yards inspired tiered cascading balconies idea that will add some color, add some vegetation inside the stadium. That the concept images have some trees in there. That'll be nice. A skywalk to connect the upper levels, so there's less up and down, some more efficient escalators, so some accessibility stuff going on as well. So quite a few pretty nice looking quality of life upgrades, aesthetic upgrades. Hopefully this includes some more color, where there's a lot of big cement, big just exposed bare cement around the stadium. I would love to see them take advantage of all that blank space that could be a canvas for various displays that you see at other stadiums around the US and around the world. I think that'd be a great idea too, but we'll see what continues to emerge here. You can see those plans. That the Gensler presentation is out there. Just Google Gensler Paul Brown Stadium. You'll see a few articles. You'll see 20 or so, I think maybe a little bit more concept photos, and you can get yourself caught up on what some of the plans are that are being proposed along with the county for Paul Brown Stadium's upgrades that could be coming up in the near future. That's going to do it for this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. The Bengals are back at practice on Thursday, back in pads, we assume, and we will have your updates after another training camp practice coming your way tomorrow. Until next time, Bengals fans, thanks for listening to the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.